My name is Sophia Reed. I'm 28 years old. And for the past 20 years, my family has called me the slow one. While my sister, Scarlett, became the pride of the entire family, Harvard, scholarships, the future heir to an empire, I was always the shadow standing behind her. Family dinners were never short on laughter. But it was never for me. They laughed at me, at my dyslexia, which made me read slowly, write incorrectly, and always be seen as not smart enough. They never hit me. They didn't need to. All they had to do was make me believe that I had no value. I was excluded from every decision, paid less than my own sister in the family business, and treated like a mistake that needed to be hidden. But the worst part wasn't how they treated me. It was that I used to believe they were right. Until that day. The day my sister graduated, at a lavish party filled with hundreds of guests, when my family once again publicly erased me from their lives, a stranger walked up and handed me an envelope. Inside it was something that could destroy every lie they had built about me. And they had no idea. My grandmother had seen everything. The Whitford family wasn't just wealthy, they were the kind of wealthy whose name was etched on hospital wings and museum plaques. In Manhattan, that name meant power, money, and flawless image. My father, Gerald Whitford, was the CEO of Whitford Properties, a real estate empire worth tens of millions, originally built from nothing by my grandmother in 1965. But by his generation, it was no longer about building anything, it was about maintaining the reputation. And in that world, everything had to be perfect. My mother, Priscilla, was the kind of woman who could smile warmly at guests while her eyes turned ice cold when she looked at her own daughter. She understood everyone's place in the family, who was the pride and who was the flaw that needed to be hidden. Scarlett was always the center. From a young age, she had private tutors, violin lessons at Juilliard, advanced academic programs, and access to the very best resources. Every one of her achievements was amplified into a victory for the entire family. And me? I was the unwanted exception in a perfect picture. No one ever said it out loud, but everyone understood. I wasn't invested in, wasn't expected to succeed, and over time, I simply stopped being counted. In the Whitford family, a person's worth was measured by their achievements, and I was the one who never met the standard. I was diagnosed with dyslexia at 7. For most people, reading a paragraph takes a few minutes. For me, every word seemed to move, flip, and rearrange itself, turning even the simplest sentences into a maze I couldn't escape. But what hurt the most wasn't the difficulty of learning. It was how my family responded to it. By the time I was 12, Scarlett had private tutors, violin lessons at Juilliard, and top-tier SAT prep. Meanwhile, when I asked for help to improve my reading, my mother just sighed. "We've already tried. Some children just aren't meant for academics." That sentence, I believed it for years. I stopped asking, stopped trying to be recognized. I figured things out on my own, listening to audiobooks, drawing diagrams, memorizing through images. I found ways to survive in a world that wasn't built for me. But every time I tried to take a step forward, they pulled me back, with a look, a comment, a quiet laugh. No yelling, no direct insults, just enough to make me believe I would never be good enough. If you've ever been looked down on by your own family, labeled as not good enough, comment 1. I want to know. You're not the only one. Amid all the judgmental looks and cold silence, there was only one person who never saw me as a failure. My grandmother, Eleanor. Every Sunday afternoon, I took the train to her apartment on the Upper West Side. Not to be tested on my grades, not to be compared, but to be heard. She didn't teach me to read the way schools did. She told stories. She turned old contracts into narratives, with structure, logic, and meaning. "You read slowly," she once said, gently placing her hand over mine, "but you notice what others miss." At the time, I didn't fully understand what she meant. But I remember the feeling. For the first time in my life, someone wasn't trying to fix me. They chose to believe in me. In her small apartment, I wasn't the slow one. I was just Sophia. She never spoke badly about my father, never argued. But sometimes, when I told her what was happening at home, her eyes would darken, not out of disappointment in me, but because of something deeper. As if she had already seen a truth I wasn't old enough to understand. One day, she gave me a small wooden box, simple, worn, but carefully preserved. "Keep it," she said. "Don't open it now. When the time comes, you'll know." I didn't ask any questions, but I had no idea that what was inside that box would change my entire life. That Christmas, everything unfolded exactly the way my family always presented it, perfect to the point of being artificial. 20 people sat around a long mahogany table, a crystal chandelier glowing overhead, the food arranged like a royal banquet. This wasn't just dinner. It was a performance called The Perfect Whitford Family. My father stood, raising his glass. His voice rang out with pride. Scarlett has been accepted to Harvard Law on a full scholarship. The room erupted in applause. All eyes turned to my sister. Compliments, hugs, proud tears. Then, his gaze shifted to me. The warmth was gone, so was the pride. And Sophia, he paused for a second, as if searching for something to say. Well, she's here too. A few laughs rippled through the room, quiet, but loud enough for me to feel every beat of it. Scarlett said nothing. In fact, she laughed along. I stared down at the plate in front of me, everything blurred. Not because of the lights, but because I didn't want anyone to see my eyes turning red. Under the table, a hand gently took mine. I looked up. My grandmother was watching me. She didn't say a word, but her eyes were full of anger, not at me, at this family. And in that moment, I didn't know that silence had just set something in motion that no one in that room could stop. 3 months after that Christmas dinner, my grandmother called me to her apartment. Her voice over the phone was soft but firm. Sophia, I need to show you something. When I arrived, she didn't say much. She didn't bring up the family, didn't ask if I was okay. She just sat there, in her familiar chair, her gaze as sharp as ever, but this time, there was something different. She handed me a small wooden box. Dark brown, with worn brass hinges, yet carefully preserved down to every detail. Keep it, she said. Don't open it. Not yet. I held the box in my hands, feeling its weight. Not just physical, but something heavier, as if it carried an answer I wasn't ready to face. What's inside? I asked. She looked at me for a long moment, then said only one thing. When the time comes, you'll understand why I chose you. Chose me? In a family that had always treated me like I didn't belong. She spoke as if I was the only one she trusted. I brought the box home and placed it in the corner of my closet. So many times I wanted to open it. So many times. But I didn't because deep down, I knew, the moment I opened that box, everything would change. If you've ever had a moment where you knew your life was about to take a turn, comment 1. After graduating from an ordinary university, not an Ivy League, not something that made my family proud, I decided to apply to their own company, Whitford Properties. I wasn't expecting special treatment. I just wanted a chance. My father agreed to hire me, but not in development or strategy, not anywhere I could prove myself. Instead, I was made an administrative assistant. Salary, $42,000 a year. At the same time, Scarlett walked into the company as a senior legal advisor. Her salary, $280,000, not including bonuses. No one needed to explain that gap. My daily work was photocopying documents, booking meeting rooms, and making coffee for people who didn't even know my name. I wasn't invited to any meetings. No one asked for my opinion. No one expected anything from me. But I stayed. Not because I liked the job, but because I wanted to understand how everything worked. During long hours by the copy machine, I started listening, observing, memorizing. When executives discussed deals in the hallway, I quietly mapped everything in my mind, the relationships, the cash flow, the hidden risks. A skill I was forced to develop just to survive was slowly becoming the very thing that set me apart. But at the time, no one noticed, and they had no idea that their underestimation would become their biggest mistake. To everyone else, I was just the girl standing by the copy machine, quiet, invisible. But in the very space they thought I didn't belong, I started seeing the things they overlooked. I don't read documents quickly, but I read them differently. I don't focus on every single line. I look at the structure, who's connected to whom, where the money flows, how one small decision could affect multiple parties. I map everything out in my head. Contracts that took others hours to analyze, I could grasp the logic just by seeing the big picture, not because I was smarter than them, but because I was forced to think differently. Years of being labeled slow taught me patience. Being left behind taught me how to observe. And all of that, quietly, was turning into an advantage no one noticed. My grandmother once told me, "Your father reads contracts like a lawyer." looking for leverage. You read them like an architect, seeing the entire system. At the time, I didn't fully understand. But standing in that small office space, listening to conversations they thought I couldn't follow, I began to realize she was right. I didn't need to be like them to succeed. I just needed to see what they couldn't. And at some point, that would change the entire game. The email came on a Tuesday afternoon. Subject: position restructuring, confidential. I read it 3 times, then once more. My position was being eliminated. Effective in 2 months. No clear explanation, no face-to-face meeting, just a few cold lines, ending 2 years of trying to prove myself. But what broke me wasn't losing the job. It was what I heard afterward. That evening, I stayed late to organize some files. Through the thin wall separating me from my father's office, I heard his voice. "We can't keep her here. When Scarlett takes over, it looks bad." My mother replied gently as if she were talking about the weather. "We've done everything we could. Some children just don't have it." Then she has to go. That was it. No anger. No argument. Just a decision, as if I had never belonged there. I stood there, my hand against the wall, feeling everything inside me freeze. If I accepted this, I would always be the failure they had defined me as. And for the first time in my life, I asked myself, maybe I'm not the problem. If you've ever been pushed aside by your own family or workplace as if you didn't exist. Comment 1. The email came on a Tuesday afternoon. Subject: position restructuring, confidential. I read it 3 times, then once more. My position was being eliminated. Effective in 2 months. No clear explanation, no face-to-face meeting, just a few cold lines, ending 2 years of trying to prove myself. But what broke me wasn't losing the job. It was what I heard afterward. That evening, I stayed late to organize some files. Through the thin wall separating me from my father's office, I heard his voice. "We can't keep her here. When Scarlett takes over, it looks bad." My mother replied gently as if she were talking about the weather. "We've done everything we could. Some children just don't have it." Then she has to go. That was it. No anger. No argument. Just a decision, as if I had never belonged there. I stood there, my hand against the wall, feeling everything inside me freeze. If I accepted this, I would always be the failure they had defined me as. And for the first time in my life, I asked myself, maybe I'm not the problem. If you've ever been pushed aside by your own family or workplace as if you didn't exist. Comment 1. While the room was still echoing with applause, I stood up and quietly left my table. No one noticed. No one needed to. I walked toward the exit, just wanting a breath of air before everything inside me fell apart. And then I saw him. An older man, gray-haired, standing quietly near the entrance. Not talking, not smiling, just observing. His eyes landed on me. As I passed, he stepped forward. "Are you Sophia Reed?" I paused. "Yes." He handed me a business card. "A lawyer. Jonathan Ellis. I used to work with your grandmother." My heart tightened. "My grandmother passed away 3 years ago." "I know." His voice was calm, certain. "And she left this for you, with very specific instructions about when to deliver it." He pulled out a thick envelope, sealed with red wax. "Why today?" He glanced back toward the ballroom behind me, where my father was still standing on stage. "Your grandmother said to give it to Sophia on the day Gerald showed her exactly who he is." I took the envelope. My hands trembled slightly. "What's inside?" He didn't answer directly. He only said, "The truth." And in that moment, I knew everything was about to change. I couldn't open the envelope in the ballroom. I walked straight into the back hallway, where cold fluorescent lights replaced the luxury inside. My hands trembled as I broke the seal. 3 pages, dense text, notarized, signed. I forced myself to read slowly, line by line, and then I saw it. 51% of Whitford Properties shares transferred to Sophia Reed. I froze. Read it again, then again. 51%. Not a small portion, not just an inheritance, control. The company my father was running no longer belonged to him. I kept reading, my heart pounding so hard I could barely hear anything else. Sophia is not slow. Sophia was abandoned. My throat tightened. My grandmother had seen everything. Not just seen it. She had prepared for this. But then I reached the final line. Condition: the heir must call an emergency board meeting within 72 hours of receiving the will. 72 hours. If I didn't act, everything would disappear. I leaned back against the wall, the paper shaking in my hands. This wasn't just an opportunity anymore. It was a choice. Stay silent, or change everything. If you've ever had a moment where you had to choose between fear and standing up, comment 1. That night, I returned to my small apartment, cramped, dim, and completely opposite from the world of luxury my family had just left behind. For the first time, I opened the wooden box my grandmother had given me years ago. Inside was a handwritten letter and a USB drive. I read every line. She had known, for a long time. She knew my father had tried to reduce her control over the company. She knew how he manipulated everything and how he treated me to justify it. The USB contained evidence. A recording of a board meeting from 2018, not suspicion. The truth, captured. I sat there for hours, replaying every word. Everything he said confirmed what I had felt for years. I was no longer the passive one. The next morning, I called a name on the board list. Margaret Coleman, my grandmother's close friend. She picked up immediately. "I've been waiting for this call," she said. We talked for nearly an hour. No small talk, no doubt. Just a plan. I needed 3 board members to call for an emergency meeting. She said she could help, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was fighting alone. I looked at the phone in my hand. 72 hours. The clock had started, and this time I wouldn't stay silent. On the morning of May 18th, I stood outside the boardroom on the 42nd floor of Whitford Tower, the place I had never even been allowed to enter before. I was wearing a blazer borrowed from my roommate, a little oversized, not perfect, but enough to make me feel like I belonged here. "You're not on the list." Security stopped me. Before I could say anything, a familiar voice came from behind. "She doesn't belong here." Scarlett. She stepped forward, flawless as always. Her gaze was cold. "What are you planning to do? Make a bigger joke out of yourself?" "I have business with the board." Scarlett laughed. Sharp. Brief. "You can't even understand a financial report? Let her in." The voice came from inside. Margaret Coleman stood at the door, calm, decisive. The door opened. I walked in. 12 people sat around the table. My father at the center. The way he looked at me, like I was a mistake that needed fixing. "I don't think we need to waste time on this," he said. Scarlett followed, her voice soft but laced with mockery. "Sophia has dyslexia. She struggles with reading." A few people shifted uncomfortably. I stood straight. My heart was pounding, but my voice didn't shake. "I'm not here to talk about my reading ability." I placed the documents on the table. "I'm here to talk about ownership." The room fell silent. I slid the will across the table to the chairman. "This document was notarized in 2019, I said, my voice so steady it surprised even me, "and it supersedes all previous versions." My father let out a dry laugh. "That's absurd. My mother made a will in 2015. That was the old version." Jonathan Ellis stepped forward, confirmed it, brief, undeniable. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. I continued playing the recording from the USB. My father's voice filled the room, clear, cold, as he proposed reducing his own mother's control. No one spoke. For the first time, they didn't look at me like a mistake. They looked at me like a threat. "That doesn't prove you can run the company," Scarlett cut in. "I never said I would," I replied. I looked each board member in the eye. "I'm proposing a vote of no confidence in the CEO." Scarlett froze. My father's hands tightened. I didn't remove him. They did. One by one, hands went up, the air grew heavy. The result, majority no confidence, no shouting, no revenge, just a decision, a fair one. My father stood, looked at me, for the first time without contempt, but with realization. He had been wrong, and the cost was everything. When the elevator doors closed behind me, everything finally went quiet. No more arguments, no more looks of contempt, just me and the truth. I had won. But it didn't feel the way I thought it would. There was no rush of joy, no sense of revenge, just a quiet emptiness, as if I had let go of something I'd been holding on to for 28 years. Hope. Hope that one day my family would change. Hope that if I tried hard enough, they would finally see me. But the truth was, they had seen me all along. They just chose not to. In the weeks that followed, everything changed quickly. My father stepped down. The company was restructured. The people who didn't even know my name started calling me the majority shareholder. My mother came to see me. For the first time, she apologized. Scarlett did too. No longer perfect, no longer arrogant, just human. I didn't go back to how things were. I couldn't, but I chose not to keep hating them. I chose to move forward. Because in the end, what my grandmother left me wasn't just power. It was the right to define my own worth. And for the first time in my life, I didn't need anyone else to validate it.